So I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades, which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. It was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto we Sizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map, when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. This is not a condemnation of the Jews at all, and it is not a support of Hamas, but it is an understanding of why Hamas arose, and in fact, why Israel created Hamas, why Netanyahu needs Hamas, in the same way that the white government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto we Sizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987-88, 88-89. The things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles, and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority. And you see this happening. So whilst we can and should be feel revulsion for the attacks of the 7th of October, if we don't understand why they happened and the context for those attacks and the history of oppression, then we can never have sympathy for the Palestinians. We lose all empathy because we've been told for years and years and years that these are horrible, uneducated terrorists, that they are less than human. And I lived through that as a young man, and I saw the results of it, the results on me as a thoughtful, well-educated, intelligent person. Imagine the impact on the average Israeli who gets fed this day after day after day, and that's very much reflected by what Americans and British and Western Europeans have been fed for decades. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves, and make a moral judgment based on our real values as a human, bring our empathy into play and look at the situation and say, hold on, how can we do anything other than wish for and promote and act for a free Palestine? I was very much taken with Elon Musk's latest podcast with Lex Friedman. It was an excellent thing. I mean, look, I don't know what I really think about Elon Musk, but he made an extremely important point, saying, well, what's the solution? The solution to the current crisis, other than the integration of Palestinians into the civil life of Israel as full citizens, is for Israel to start committing conspicuous acts of kindness, to be showing that they can be something other than the oppressors, to start showing empathy and kindness for the Palestinians, to reduce the absolute certainty that they are producing nothing more than another generation of terrorists, of people who want revenge. That narrative has to change. And I'm certain that they will find that the Palestinians at heart simply want to live in freedom like the rest of us, simply want to get on with their lives, raise their kids without the threat of those kids dying in some random rocket attack by the IDF. And those acts can demonstrate goodwill. It's the start of something. But at the moment, if anyone thinks that what Israel is doing is actually going to solve the problem, it's delusional. All they're doing is creating more and more and more Hamas members.